I never thought betrayal could taste so bitter until I stood there in my emerald bridesmaid dress, watching my parents turn their backs on me at my own brother's wedding, not knowing that with one simple phone call, I could shut down their perfect day entirely. Not just embarrass them, not just cause a scene. I could literally end the celebration, send 300 guests home, and watch their fairy tale crumble to dust. Because the stunning Rosewood Manor they'd chosen for Damien's dream wedding? The one with the crystal chandeliers and panoramic lake views they'd bragged about for months? I owned it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That morning had started like any other wedding day: chaos, coffee, and controlled hysteria. I'd woken up at dawn in my cramped studio apartment in downtown Millbrook, my phone already buzzing with messages from my mother, Vivian Hartwell. Cassandra, don't forget the backup corsages. Cassandra, make sure your hair appointment is confirmed. Cassandra, please try not to overshadow the bride today. That last one stung, but I swallowed it down like I always did. You see, I was the family disappointment, the black sheep. The daughter who'd chosen art school over law school, who'd opened a small event planning business instead of joining Dad's accounting firm, who'd remained stubbornly single at 28, while my golden boy brother Damien was marrying his college sweetheart in what my parents called the social event of the decade. I'd spent 3 years building my business, Dreamscape Events, from nothing. 3 years of sleepless nights, ramen dinners, and slowly building a reputation in the wedding industry. 3 years of my parents asking when I'd get a real job and stop playing with party planning. They had no idea that their precious venue booking had gone through my company's subsidiary. They had no idea that the contract they'd signed, the deposits they'd paid, the beautiful space they'd fallen in love with, it all led back to me. The irony was delicious, even if I'd never planned to use it. I'd discovered Rosewood Manor 2 years ago when it was on the verge of bankruptcy. The previous owners, an elderly couple named the Weatherbys, couldn't keep up with the maintenance costs. I had seen its potential immediately: the soaring ceilings, the original hardwood floors, the way the morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Using every penny of my savings and a business loan that kept me awake at night, I'd bought it quietly through my LLC. My parents didn't know because they'd never bothered to ask about my business. They saw event planning as frivolous, temporary, something I'd eventually grow out of. They certainly never imagined their irresponsible daughter could own property, let alone a venue they'd specifically chosen because it was exclusive and prestigious. The morning of the wedding, I'd driven to Rosewood Manor early to oversee the final preparations. My team was already there. Jade setting up the floral arrangements, Oliver fine-tuning the lighting, Carmen coordinating with the catering staff. They all knew who really owned the place, but they also knew to keep quiet, not because I'd asked them to, but because they understood the complicated dynamics of family shame. As I watched the staff transform the main ballroom into something magical, I felt that familiar tug of pride mixed with loneliness. This was my creation, my vision, my success. The crystal chandeliers I'd personally selected cast rainbows across the walls. The hand-picked linens complemented the natural stone perfectly. Every detail had been carefully chosen, lovingly implemented. And my family had no idea. I'd been tempted to tell them so many times over the past few months. When my mother complained about the venue coordinator's unreasonable requests for final head counts. When my father grumbled about the deposit schedule. When Damien worried about whether the space would be ready in time. I could have revealed the truth, could have watched their faces transform from complaint to shock to grudging respect. But something held me back. Maybe it was the fear that even this success wouldn't be enough for them. Maybe it was the knowledge that they'd find a way to diminish it, to make it about their connections or their influence, rather than my hard work. Or maybe, deep down, I wanted to prove that I could succeed without their approval, without their acknowledgement, without their love. I checked my watch as the morning sun climbed higher. In a few hours, guests would start arriving. My brother would marry Helena in the garden pavilion I'd designed myself. My parents would host their perfect celebration in rooms I'd lovingly restored. And I would stand there in my emerald dress, smiling and playing the supportive sister, while they continued to treat me like an afterthought. I had no idea that before the day was over, they would make their feelings so crystal clear that I'd have no choice but to reveal the truth. I had no idea that their words would cut so deep that my secret would become a weapon. I had no idea that this beautiful day I'd helped create would become the stage for the most devastating and liberating moment of my life. But I should have known. Because if there was one thing the Hartwell family excelled at, it was making their disappointment known. And if there was one thing I'd learned in my 28 years, it was that eventually, every secret finds its way to the surface. The wedding was about to begin, and I was about to discover just how much power I'd been quietly accumulating while they'd been busy dismissing me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The morning unfolded exactly as I'd expected it would in the Hartwell household, with military precision and barely concealed anxiety. I arrived at my childhood home in Willowbrook Heights at 8 sharp, my garment bag slung over my shoulder and a box of emergency wedding supplies in my arms. The Tudor-style house I'd grown up in buzzed with activity, hairstylists setting up in the master bedroom, photographers capturing candid moments that were anything but spontaneous. Cassandra, finally, my mother Vivian, called from the top of the mahogany staircase, her voice carrying that familiar note of exasperation she seemed to reserve exclusively for me. She descended like a queen, already dressed in her powder blue mother of the groom ensemble, every silver hair perfectly in place. "Helena's been asking for you." Something about the bouquet ribbon. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, passing framed family photos that told the story of the Hartwell legacy. Damien's graduation from Yale Law, his engagement announcement in the Millbrook Tribune, his promotion to partner at Whitmore & Associates. A few scattered pictures of me existed too, but they were smaller, relegated to corners, afterthoughts in the family narrative. Helena's bridal suite, my old bedroom actually, had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. White roses everywhere, ribbons streaming from every surface, and Helena herself sitting at my childhood vanity while a makeup artist worked magic with brushes and powders. She looked radiant, exactly the kind of bride my mother had always dreamed of having in the family. "Cass!" Helena jumped up, careful not to disturb her half-finished makeup. "Thank God you're here. I'm having a complete meltdown about the bouquet. The ribbon doesn't feel right." She gestured helplessly at the beautiful arrangement of white peonies and garden roses sitting on the dresser. I examined it with the trained eye I'd developed over years of handling bridal emergencies. The silk ribbon was lovely, but I could see what she meant. It was too stiff, too formal for the romantic garden party feel they were going for. "I've got ivory velvet ribbon in my emergency kit," I said, already heading for my supplies. "It'll be perfect with your dress." "This is exactly why we needed you here," Helena said, squeezing my hand. "You always know how to fix things." If only that were true for everything, I thought, but I smiled and got to work. Helena had always been kind to me, even when my own family wasn't. She was one of the few people who actually listened when I talked about my business, who asked genuine questions about my work, instead of treating it like an extended hobby. As I rewrapped the bouquet stems, my mother appeared in the doorway, surveying the scene with her critical eye. "Cassandra, when you're finished with that, your father needs you downstairs. Something about the transportation schedule to the venue." "The limos should arrive at exactly 2:30, I said without looking up. "That gives us a 15-minute buffer for photos here, then a 20-minute drive to Rosewood Manor, arriving at 3:15 for the 4 o'clock ceremony." My mother's eyebrows rose slightly. "How do you know the exact timing?" I paused, realizing I'd revealed more knowledge than a simple bridesmaid should have. I helped Helena coordinate some of the logistics. I said carefully. You know how detail-oriented I am. Right, Vivian said, though her tone suggested she found my involvement mildly suspicious. Well, your father is still worried about the coordination. You know how he gets about timing. I did know. Richard Hartwell ran his accounting firm with the same obsessive attention to schedules that he brought to family events. In his world, being 5 minutes late was equivalent to professional suicide. The fact that he was trusting me with transportation logistics was actually a minor miracle. Usually, he handled all important family coordination himself. I'll go talk to him, I said, finishing the bouquet and handing it back to Helena. Perfect? Perfect, she agreed, beaming. Downstairs, I found my father in his home office, phone pressed to his ear, his face wearing that pinched expression he got when dealing with vendors. No, that's not acceptable, he was saying. We confirmed this weeks ago. I waited until he hung up before approaching. Dad, Mom said you needed me? He looked up, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Cassandra? Good. We've got a situation with the venue coordinator. She's not answering her phone, and I need to confirm the final headcount and seating arrangements. Do you have her contact information? My stomach tightened. The venue coordinator was actually Carmen, my assistant, who was probably too busy setting up the ceremony space to answer calls from anxious fathers of the groom. I can handle it, I said quickly. I've been in touch with her all week about the details. You have? Richard looked surprised. I didn't realize you were so involved with the vendor management. Helena asked me to help coordinate some things, I said, which was technically true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. You know how I am with organization. For a moment, my father's expression softened. That's actually very helpful, Cassandra. I appreciate you stepping up for your brother's big day. It was such a small acknowledgement, but it hit me unexpectedly hard. When was the last time either of my parents had thanked me for anything? When had they last recognized that my skills, the ones they constantly dismissed, might actually be valuable? Of course, I managed. I want Damien's wedding to be perfect. It will be, Richard said with the confidence of a man who'd paid a substantial sum to ensure perfection. Rosewood Manor comes highly recommended. Apparently it's become quite exclusive since the ownership changed hands. Very professional operation. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I'm sure it'll be beautiful. Your mother has already started getting compliments from the other mothers about our choice of venue, he continued, straightening his tie. Apparently several families have tried to book it for their own events, but they're quite selective about their clientele. The irony was almost too much to bear. My parents were bragging about a venue I owned, praising the professionalism of a business I'd built, taking credit for connections they didn't even know they had. And here I was, standing in my father's office, letting them believe their success story while continuing to play the role of the helpful daughter who'd finally found a way to contribute. I should go check on Damien, I said, needing to escape before I said something I'd regret. Good idea, Richard said, already turning back to his paperwork. Make sure he's ready. Today needs to go off without a hitch. As I climbed the stairs to find my brother, I wondered if he had any idea how much pressure was riding on this day. For my parents, this wasn't just a wedding. It was a validation of everything they'd worked for, everything they'd built, everything they believed about success and status and doing things the right way. And I was about to discover just how far they'd go to protect that image, even if it meant sacrificing their own daughter. I found Damien in his childhood bedroom, standing before the full-length mirror in his charcoal gray tuxedo, fumbling with his bow tie. At 31, my brother still had that golden boy look that had charmed teachers, coaches, and clients throughout his life. But today, his usual confidence seemed shaken. Need help? I asked, stepping into the room that had remained virtually unchanged since his high school days. Sports trophies lined the shelves, his Yale pennant still hung above the desk, and a photo of him shaking hands with the mayor after winning some debate competition occupied the place of honor on his nightstand. Please, he said, relief flooding his voice. I've tied this thing a dozen times, and it keeps coming out crooked. I moved behind him, working the silk bow tie with practiced fingers. Nervous? Terrified, he admitted with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Not about Helena, about everything else. You know how Mom and Dad get about these things. I did know. I'd watched them orchestrate every major event in Damien's life with the same intensity other people reserved for military campaigns. His graduation party, his bar exam celebration, his engagement announcement. Each one had been a carefully choreographed performance designed to showcase the Hartwell family's success. They just want everything to be perfect for you, I said, though we both knew it was about more than that. Sometimes I think they care more about what other people think than what I want, Damien said quietly, then caught my eye in the mirror. Sorry, that's not fair. I know I'm lucky to have their support. I finished his tie and stepped back. There, perfect. Thanks, Cass. He turned around, his expression serious. And I mean for everything. I know you've been helping behind the scenes more than anyone realizes. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message. Then another. Then my phone started ringing. Sorry, I muttered, glancing at the screen. Carmen's name flashed urgently. My heart rate spiked. Carmen never called unless there was a genuine emergency. I need to take this, I told Damien, stepping into the hallway. Carmen, what's wrong? Cassandra, thank God. Carmen's voice was tight with panic. We have a massive problem at the venue. The main electrical transformer just blew. We've lost power to the entire east wing. That's the bridal suite, the ceremony pavilion, and half the reception hall. My blood went cold. How bad is it? Bad, really bad. The electrician says it's going to take at least 6 hours to get a replacement transformer, and that's if we can even find one on a Saturday. The backup generator can handle basic lighting, but not the full electrical load for a wedding this size. No sound system, no kitchen equipment, no air conditioning. I sank against the hallway wall, my mind racing. 300 guests were expecting a flawless celebration in less than 5 hours. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock sharp. My parents had invited everyone who mattered in their social and professional circles. What about the other venues in the area? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It's wedding season, Cass. Everything decent is booked solid. I've called 8 places already. The only thing available is the community center in Millbrook, and it's... Carmen's voice trailed off. It's what? It's not exactly Hartwell family standards. She was right. The Millbrook Community Center was fine for birthday parties and graduation celebrations, but it was a far cry from the elegant sophistication my parents had been bragging about for months. Folding chairs instead of Chiavari chairs. Industrial lighting instead of crystal chandeliers. Linoleum floors instead of polished hardwood. Keep trying to find alternatives, I said. I'll handle things on this end. Cassandra, there's something else, Carmen said hesitantly. The transformer didn't just blow on its own. The electrician thinks it was overloaded. Apparently, the previous event management company had been running the electrical system beyond capacity for months. It was an accident waiting to happen. My stomach twisted. I'd bought Rosewood Manor knowing it needed work, but the electrical inspection had cleared the main systems. The previous management company had been cutting corners, pushing equipment beyond its limits to save money. And now, on the most important day my family had planned in years, everything was falling apart. How long before you absolutely need a decision? I asked. If we're going to move the wedding, we need to start relocating equipment in the next hour. The vendors, the flowers, the catering setup. It's a massive undertaking. I closed my eyes, calculating. An hour to make a decision that would either salvage my brother's wedding or destroy my parents' reputation. An hour to figure out how to explain to 300 guests that their elegant evening had been downgraded to a community center celebration. I'll call you back in 30 minutes, I said. As I hung up, I heard voices drifting up from downstairs. My mother was on the phone with someone, her tone bright and social. Oh yes, we're so excited, Vivian was saying. Rosewood Manor is simply stunning. You really must see it. The renovation is exquisite. We feel so fortunate to have secured such an exclusive venue for Damien's special day." I could hear the pride in her voice, the way she emphasized words like exclusive and exquisite. She was probably talking to Evelyn Thornberry, the president of her garden club and her primary social rival. Mrs. Thornberry had been trying to one-up my mother for years, and landing Rosewood Manor for the wedding had been Vivian's ultimate victory. Footsteps approached, and Helena appeared at the top of the stairs, radiant in her wedding dress but looking concerned. "Cass, is everything okay? You look pale." I stared at her, this sweet woman who deserved the perfect day she'd dreamed of, then glanced toward Damien's room where my brother was probably adjusting his cufflinks and trying to calm his pre-ceremony nerves. Downstairs, my parents were basking in the social triumph they'd been anticipating for months, and I held the power to save it all or watch it crumble. The terrible irony wasn't lost on me. The venue that was about to fail my family was the same venue I'd poured my heart, soul, and life savings into. The electrical problems weren't my fault. They were the legacy of the previous owner's neglect, but I would be the one deciding how to handle the crisis. I could reveal the truth right now. Tell them I owned Rosewood Manor, that I had the authority to make executive decisions, that I could authorize emergency repairs regardless of cost. But that would mean exposing the secret I'd guarded for 2 years, admitting that their irresponsible daughter had been more successful than they'd ever imagined. Or I could stay silent and watch my brother's wedding day implode, taking my parents' social standing with it. "Helena," I said carefully, "if you had to choose between having your wedding in a beautiful venue with potential problems or a simpler venue where everything would definitely work perfectly, what would you choose?" She tilted her head, studying my face. "Is there something I should know about?" Before I could answer, my father's voice boomed from downstairs. "Cassandra, we need you down here. There's some confusion with the venue coordinator, and we need this sorted out immediately." Helena touched my arm gently. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together, okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure that was true. Because as I headed downstairs to face my parents, I realized that this crisis was about to force a choice I'd been avoiding for 2 years. The question was no longer whether to tell them the truth about Rosewood Manor. The question was whether I was ready to watch their world fall apart when they discovered that their greatest success was built on a foundation they'd never bothered to acknowledge. The wedding was 5 hours away, and everything was about to change. I descended the stairs with leaden feet, my phone clutched in my sweaty palm like a ticking bomb. In the living room, I found my parents huddled around my father's laptop, their faces etched, with the kind of concentrated worry usually reserved for tax audits or medical diagnoses. "There you are," my father said without looking up. "We've been trying to reach someone in charge at Rosewood Manor for the past 20 minutes. The phone keeps going to some automated system, and we need to confirm the final arrangements." My mother straightened up, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the stress lines creeping around her eyes. "The woman we've been dealing with, Carmen something, she's completely unreachable. This is unacceptable for a venue of this caliber." I felt my chest tighten. Carmen was probably dealing with electricians and emergency contractors right now, trying to perform miracles to save the day. But I couldn't explain that without revealing why I knew so much about the venue's operations. "Maybe they're just busy with setup," I suggested weakly. "Busy?" My father's voice rose an octave. "Cassandra, we have 300 guests arriving in 4 hours. The mayor of Millbrook will be there. Judge Blackstone from the state Supreme Court. Half the partners from my firm. This isn't some backyard barbecue where busy is an acceptable excuse." I watched my parents' anxiety escalate and felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. This was exactly how they'd reacted during my childhood whenever anything threatened to disrupt their carefully constructed image. The time I'd gotten sick at the country club Christmas party. The time Damien had gotten detention right before parent-teacher conferences. The way they'd attacked any potential source of embarrassment with the intensity of people defending their lives. Because in their world, reputation was life. Let me try calling, I offered, pulling out my phone. Maybe I'll have better luck. I dialed Carmen's number, knowing she wouldn't answer. After 4 rings, it went to voicemail, and I left a deliberately vague message about checking on the final arrangements while my parents watched expectantly. Still nothing, I reported. This is a disaster, my mother muttered, beginning to pace across the Persian rug. Evelyn Thornberry specifically asked about our venue choice at the garden club meeting last week. I told her all about the exclusivity, the renovation, the attention to detail. If something goes wrong, she didn't need to finish. I knew exactly what she was thinking. Evelyn Thornberry would spread news of any wedding catastrophe through their social circle, faster than wildfire. Within hours, every member of the country club, every partner's wife at Dad's firm, every family in their prestigious neighborhood would know that the Hartwells' perfect wedding had been a spectacular failure. My phone buzzed with a text message. Carmen again. Electrician update. Definitely 6+ hours for repair. Need decision in 20 minutes or we start moving to backup venue. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. 20 minutes. The window for saving this wedding was shrinking rapidly, and I was the only person in the room who actually understood what was happening. What was that? My mother asked sharply, noticing my expression. Nothing important, I lied, sliding the phone back into my pocket. Just Helena asking about the transportation timing. But my father was studying me with the analytical gaze he usually reserved for complicated financial statements. Cassandra, you seem unusually informed about the venue operations. How exactly have you been helping with coordination? The question hung in the air like smoke. I could feel both parents watching me now, their attention focused in a way that made my skin prickle. For most of my life, being invisible to them had been painful. Now their sudden scrutiny felt dangerous. I just helped Helena with some of the vendor communications, I said carefully. You know how detail-oriented she is. She wanted someone to help track all the moving pieces. But you seem to know quite a bit about this particular venue, my mother pressed. More than just basic logistics. Before I could respond, Damien appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his bow tie perfectly straight but his face clouded with concern. What's going on? You all look like someone died. We're having communication issues with the venue, Richard explained tersely. Nothing that can't be resolved, but it's concerning given the timeline. Damien's face went pale. What kind of issues? Probably nothing, I said quickly, shooting him a reassuring look. Just some coordination details that need to be confirmed. My phone buzzed again. This time, a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but the anxiety in the room seemed to thicken with each unanswered ring. You know what? My mother said suddenly, her voice taking on that decisive tone that meant she was about to take control of the situation. We're driving out there, right now. If we can't reach them by phone, we'll handle this in person. Mom, that's not necessary, I started. It absolutely is necessary, she cut me off. This is your brother's wedding day, Cassandra. Some things are too important to leave to chance. I felt panic rising in my throat. If my parents showed up at Rosewood Manor right now, they'd walk into a scene of chaos. Electricians with their trucks parked outside. Emergency equipment scattered across the grounds. Carmen and my team frantically trying to salvage the situation. And they'd have questions. Lots of questions about why their daughter seemed to know exactly what was happening when she should have been as surprised as they were. The timing is really tight, I said desperately. If we drive out there now, we'll barely have time to get back and ready for the ceremony. Then we'll get ready there, Vivian declared. The bridal suite at Rosewood Manor is supposed to be exquisite anyway. We'll just move up our departure time. My father was already reaching for his car keys. Good thinking. That way we can oversee the final preparations personally. I don't think, I began. Cassandra. My father's voice carried a warning tone I remembered from childhood. I understand you're trying to be helpful, but this situation requires parental oversight. Some problems are too big for auxiliary involvement. Auxiliary involvement. The phrase hit me like a slap. After years of building my business, after quietly purchasing and renovating the very venue they were about to inspect, After working myself to exhaustion to create something beautiful and successful, I was still just auxiliary in their eyes. "I'll go pack the emergency kit," my mother announced, already heading for the stairs. "Damien, get Helena ready for an early departure. We leave in 15 minutes. As my parents scattered to prepare for their impromptu venue inspection, I stood frozen in the living room, my phone burning a hole in my pocket. Carmen was waiting for my decision. The electricians were waiting for authorization to proceed. The backup venues were waiting for confirmation. And my family was about to drive directly into the crisis I'd been trying to protect them from. I had 15 minutes to figure out how to handle the collision of my two worlds. 15 minutes to decide whether to come clean about Rosewood Manor or watch my carefully constructed secret explode in the most public, embarrassing way possible. The worst part was that some small, vindictive corner of my heart was almost curious to see what would happen when they discovered the truth. When they realized that their auxiliary daughter had been more successful than they'd ever imagined. When they understood that their perfect venue had been perfect because of me. But as I heard Helena's delighted laughter drifting down from upstairs, as I saw the genuine excitement on Damien's face, I knew I couldn't let curiosity win. This wasn't just about my parents anymore. It was about my brother's happiness, about Helena's dream day, about 300 guests who deserved better than a family drama. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Carmen. "Stall them if my parents show up early. I'm coming with them. We'll figure this out together." Then I headed upstairs to pack my own emergency kit, wondering if it was possible to save a wedding while simultaneously destroying the foundations of everything my family believed about success, status, and their disappointment of a daughter. 15 minutes, and counting. The 20-minute drive to Rosewood Manor felt like the longest journey of my life. I sat in the back seat of my father's pristine Mercedes, wedged between Helena's voluminous wedding dress and a cooler full of emergency supplies my mother had deemed essential. Damien rode shotgun, nervously adjusting his cufflinks, while my parents maintained the kind of tense silence that preceded either explosive arguments or military-style operations. My phone had been buzzing continuously for the past 10 minutes, Carmen trying to reach me with updates, Jade texting about floral arrangements that needed to be moved, Oliver asking about lighting backup plans. Each notification made my stomach clench tighter, and I could only pray my parents couldn't hear the constant vibration from my purse. "Turn that thing off," my mother said sharply from the passenger seat. "The last thing we need is distractions while we're handling this crisis." "Sorry," I muttered, switching my phone to silent mode, but not before I caught a glimpse of Carmen's latest message. "Emergency generators in place but can only handle 40% capacity. Parents here yet?" My blood pressure spiked. They were already at the venue. My team was scrambling to manage a crisis that would expose everything the moment we walked through those doors. "You know," Helena said softly, trying to fill the oppressive silence, "I'm sure everything will be fine. These venues handled dozens of weddings. They must have protocols for any issues that come up." "That's exactly the point," my father replied tersely, navigating the winding country road that led to the manor. "For what we're paying, there shouldn't be any issues. Premium venues are supposed to provide peace of mind, not last-minute panic." I stared out the window at the familiar landscape. These were roads I'd driven countless times over the past 2 years, first as a prospective buyer, then as an owner overseeing renovations. I knew every turn, every landmark, every tree. In 10 minutes, we'd reached the wrought iron gates I'd personally selected and the circular driveway I'd had repaved last spring. "Oh my God!" Helena gasped suddenly, pointing ahead. "Is that it?" Even from a distance, Rosewood Manor was stunning. The 3-story Georgian colonial sat majestically on its hill, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens that I'd designed with a landscape architect from Charleston. The afternoon sun caught the windows just right, making the whole building seem to glow against the backdrop of ancient oak trees. "Beautiful," my mother breathed, her anxiety momentarily forgotten. "Simply stunning." But as we drew closer, I could see what my family couldn't yet notice. The subtle signs of crisis management in progress. an electrical company truck parked discreetly behind the carriage house. Extension cords snaking across the back lawn where they shouldn't be visible. The barely perceptible hum of emergency generators that I'd trained my ear to recognize. "The grounds are immaculate," Damien observed, some of his tension easing. "Helena, look at those rose gardens. They're incredible." I had planted those roses myself, spending an entire weekend on my hands and knees in the dirt, carefully spacing each bush for optimal growth and visual impact. But I couldn't tell them that. Instead, I nodded and tried to look appropriately impressed by someone else's work. My father pulled into the circular driveway, parking behind a catering van that was unloading equipment. "Right on schedule," he said with satisfaction. "Everything appears to be proceeding normally." That's when I spotted Carmen hurrying around the corner of the building, her usual composure slightly frayed but her professional mask firmly in place. She was heading directly toward our car, no doubt prepared to intercept my parents before they could discover the chaos behind the scenes. "There's someone coming to greet us," my mother noted approvingly. "Excellent customer service." Carmen reached the car just as my father was cutting the engine. Through the windshield, her eyes met mine for just a moment, and I could see the question there. How much do they know? I gave an almost imperceptible shake of my head as my family began climbing out of the Mercedes. "Good afternoon," Carmen said smoothly, extending her hand to my father. "You must be the Hartwell family. I'm Carmen Rodriguez, the venue coordinator. We've been expecting you." "We tried calling," my mother said, her tone carrying just a hint of reproach. "There seemed to be some communication difficulties." "I apologize for that," Carmen replied without missing a beat. "We've been dealing with some last-minute technical adjustments to ensure everything is perfect for your celebration. You know how these things are. Sometimes the final touches require our complete attention." Technical adjustments. I had to admire Carmen's diplomatic phrasing. "What kind of technical adjustments?" my father asked, his accountant's instincts immediately honing in on anything that sounded like a euphemism. "Nothing that will impact your event," Carmen assured him. "Just some sound system calibrations and lighting fine-tuning. We're actually ahead of schedule on most preparations." Helena clasped her hands together excitedly. "Could we see the ceremony space? I've been dreaming about seeing it all set up." "Of course," Carmen said, though I caught the slight hesitation in her voice. "The ceremony pavilion is just this way." As we walked across the main lawn, I found myself seeing Rosewood Manor through my family's eyes for the first time. The stone pathways I'd agonized over were indeed perfectly laid. The fountain I'd restored sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. The gardens that had cost me 3 months of sleep and a significant portion of my savings were absolutely breathtaking. "This is extraordinary," my mother murmured, her earlier stress temporarily forgotten. "Cassandra, isn't this just magical?" "It really is," I agreed, my throat tight with emotion I couldn't express. "How did you hear about this place, Dad?" Damien asked as we approached the ceremony pavilion. "Word of mouth," my father replied proudly. "Apparently it's become quite sought after since the renovation. The new ownership has really elevated the standards." Carmen shot me a quick glance. "The owners are very committed to excellence," she said carefully. As we rounded the corner toward the pavilion, I held my breath. This was the moment of truth. Either Carmen's team had managed to work miracles with the emergency power situation, or my parents were about to discover that their perfect venue was running on backup generators and prayer. The ceremony space came into view, and I felt a surge of pride despite everything. White wooden chairs arranged in perfect rows, an arch draped with flowing fabric and covered in the exact flowers Helena had requested. String lights twinkling overhead, powered by generators hidden so expertly that no one would ever know they weren't connected to the main electrical grid. "Oh," Helena whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect." But my father was frowning, his head tilted slightly. "What's that sound?" My heart stopped. The generators. Even well hidden, they produced a low, constant hum that someone with Richard Hartwell's attention to detail would eventually notice. "Sound?" Carmen asked innocently. A humming noise? Like machinery running somewhere. Carmen's professional smile never wavered. Probably just the fountain pumps. The water features require constant circulation to maintain that crystal-clear effect. My father nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. But I could see him listening more carefully now, his analytical mind filing away details that didn't quite add up. "Where exactly is the bridal suite?" my mother asked. "We'd like to see where Helena will be getting ready." "Right this way," Carmen said, leading us toward the main building. As we walked, my phone vibrated with another silent notification. Without thinking, I glanced at it quickly. The message was from Oliver. East wing still dark. Moving ceremony equipment to backup locations. How much longer? I slipped the phone back into my purse, but not before my mother noticed the movement. "Cassandra, I thought I told you to turn that thing off." "Sorry, just checking the time," I lied. "You seem unusually nervous today," she observed, studying my face with the same intensity she brought to analyzing dinner party guest lists. "Is there something you're not telling us?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around us, my team was performing an elaborate dance to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Generators hummed in the background. Extension cords snaked through hidden pathways. Emergency lighting cast shadows that weren't quite right. And my parents were starting to notice that the details didn't add up. "I just want everything to be perfect for Damien and Helena," I said, which was absolutely true, even if it wasn't the complete truth. "Well," my father said, checking his watch, "we should have time for a full inspection before the guests arrive. I want to see every aspect of the operation." Carmen's smile became slightly strained. "Of course, though I should mention that some areas are still undergoing final preparations." "That's fine," my mother said decisively. "We're not afraid of a little behind-the-scenes activity. In fact, it's reassuring to see the level of attention to detail." As we approached the main entrance to Rosewood Manor, I realized that the careful house of cards Carmen and I had been building was about to collapse. My parents weren't the type to be satisfied with surface-level reassurances. They would want to see everything, understand everything, control everything. And in about 5 minutes, they were going to discover that their daughter owned the very venue they'd been bragging about for months. The only question now was whether that revelation would come as a triumph or a disaster. We had just stepped into the grand foyer of Rosewood Manor when everything unraveled in the span of 30 seconds. The interior was breathtaking, exactly as I'd envisioned it during those long nights of renovation planning. Soaring ceilings with restored crown molding. A crystal chandelier that had taken me 3 months to find and another month to install properly. Gleaming hardwood floors that I'd personally refinished, spending countless weekends on my hands and knees with sanders and stain. "Magnificent," my mother breathed, her head tilting back to take in the full scope of the entrance hall. "The attention to detail is extraordinary." Helena spun slowly in her wedding dress, the layers of tulle catching the light filtering through the tall windows. "I feel like I'm in a fairy tale." But my father was frowning at something behind the main staircase. "Carmen, what's that equipment back there?" I followed his gaze and felt my stomach plummet. Partially hidden behind an ornate screen, I could see the edge of an industrial generator and several thick electrical cables snaking across the floor toward the main electrical panel. Carmen moved smoothly to block his view. "Just some routine maintenance equipment. We like to have backup systems in place for special events." "Backup systems?" My father's voice sharpened with the tone he used when reviewing questionable expense reports. "What exactly are you backing up?" Before Carmen could respond, Oliver appeared from the direction of the main reception hall, his arms full of emergency lighting equipment. He spotted our group and froze like a deer in headlights. "Oliver," Carmen said carefully, "these are the Hartwells. Could you please take that equipment around to the service entrance?" But it was too late. My mother had noticed the concerned expression on Oliver's face, the way he was carrying what were obviously emergency supplies, the slight panic in Carmen's voice. "What's going on here?" Vivian demanded, her social radar pinging with the alert that something was seriously wrong. What kind of maintenance requires emergency lighting? It's really nothing to worry about, Carmen tried again, but Oliver was already backing away with an apologetic expression that screamed guilt. Nothing to worry about? My father stepped around Carmen to get a better look at the equipment. Young man, stop right there. Oliver glanced desperately at me, then at Carmen, clearly unsure whether to obey the imposing man in the expensive suit or follow his actual boss's instructions. That's when my phone chose to ring. Loudly. In the sudden silence, the ringtone echoed through the high-ceilinged foyer like an alarm. Everyone turned to look at me as I fumbled to silence it, but not before I saw the caller ID, Rosewood Manor, main office. Carmen's face went white. Why, my father asked slowly, is the venue calling you directly, Cassandra? I stared at the phone in my hand, my mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Around me, the carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time. I started, then stopped. There was no good lie left. No explanation that would satisfy Richard Hartwell's forensic attention to detail. Helena looked confused. Cass? What's happening? But my mother was putting the pieces together with the speed of a woman who'd spent decades navigating social intrigue. Her eyes moved from my panicked expression to Carmen's professional mask slipping, to Oliver still frozen with his armload of emergency equipment. Cassandra, she said, her voice dangerously quiet, do you know what's wrong with this venue? Mom, I can explain. Answer the question. Do you know what's happening here? The weight of 2 years of secrets, 2 years of being dismissed and overlooked, 2 years of quiet success that no one had bothered to notice, pressed down on my shoulders like a physical burden. Yes, I whispered. How? My father demanded. How could you possibly know about internal operational issues at a venue you've never been to before today? The lie I was about to tell died in my throat as I looked around the foyer, my foyer. Every detail had been chosen by me, paid for by me, installed under my supervision. The crown molding I'd painstakingly restored. The chandelier I'd hunted for in antique shops across 3 states. The floors I'd refinished myself because I couldn't afford to hire professionals for everything. I owned this place. I had built this beauty from the bones of a failing business. And I was tired of pretending otherwise. Because, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word, this is my venue. The silence that followed was deafening. Helena's mouth fell open. Damien blinked as if he'd misheard. My parents stared at me like I'd just announced I was an alien from another planet. What did you say? My mother whispered. I said this is my venue. I own Rosewood Manor. I have for 2 years. Carmen stepped forward, her professional composure finally cracking into a supportive smile. Ms. Hartwell is the owner and primary renovator of the entire property. She's personally overseen every aspect of the restoration. That's impossible, my father said flatly. You don't have that kind of money. You run a small event planning business. A small event planning business that's been more successful than any of you bothered to notice, I replied, feeling a strange mix of terror and liberation. I bought this place when it was falling apart. I've spent 2 years turning it into what you see today. Helena was looking around with new eyes, her expression shifting from confusion to amazement. You did all this? Every bit of it. The electrical work that's failing? That's from the previous owners cutting corners for years. The emergency generators Oliver was moving? Those are mine, keeping your wedding on schedule while we fix problems I inherited. My mother was shaking her head slowly, as if the information simply wouldn't process. Why didn't you tell us? When? I laughed, and the sound was sharper than I intended. When you asked about my little party planning hobby. When you suggested I get a real job. When you told people I was still finding myself at 28. Cassandra, Damien said quietly, this is incredible. Why would you keep something like this secret? I looked at my brother, sweet Damien, who'd never understood the dynamics that had shaped our family for decades, because I wanted to prove I could succeed without their approval. Because I was tired of being the disappointment. Because I knew that even if I owned a successful business, even if I had achieved something real, it would never be enough for them. "That's not true," my father protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" I turned to face them both directly. "Right now, in this moment, what are you thinking? Are you proud of what I've accomplished? Or are you angry that I embarrassed you by not telling you? Are you impressed by the business I've built? Or are you calculating how this affects your social standing?" The guilty expressions on their faces told me everything I needed to know. Carmen cleared her throat diplomatically. "If I may, we do still have a wedding to coordinate. The electrical issues are manageable with the backup systems, but we need to make some decisions about the evening timeline." "Yes," Helena said quickly, clearly desperate to diffuse the tension. "Let's focus on that. We can talk about everything else later." But I could see it in my parents' eyes. The shock was already shifting into something else: calculation, damage control. How to spin this revelation to their friends. How to retroactively claim credit for their daughter's success. How to make this work for them instead of against them. "The electrical problems will be fixed by tonight," I said firmly. "The wedding will proceed exactly as planned. Your guests will have a beautiful celebration in a venue that's been personally restored and managed by your daughter." "Our daughter who owns Rosewood Manor," my mother said slowly, as if testing how the words sounded. "Your daughter who you've been dismissing and underestimating for years," I corrected. The truth was finally out. No more secrets, no more pretending, no more hiding behind other people's assumptions about my life and capabilities. But as I stood there in my own foyer, surrounded by my family's shocked faces and the evidence of everything I'd accomplished alone, I realized that telling the truth was only the beginning. Now I had to decide what to do with it. For a moment that stretched like an eternity, we all stood frozen in the grand foyer of Rosewood Manor, while the weight of my revelations settled around us like dust after an explosion. Then, as if a spell had been broken, everyone started talking at once. "2 years?" my mother said, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "You've owned this place for 2 years and never said a word?" "How much did it cost?" my father demanded, his accountant's brain immediately jumping to numbers. "Where did you get that kind of capital?" "Cass, this is amazing!" Helena exclaimed, spinning around to take in the space with new appreciation. "You created all of this?" But it was Damien's question that cut through the chaos. "Why, Cass? Why keep it secret from us?" I looked at my brother, at his genuine confusion and hurt, and felt my anger shift into something more complex. Something that included grief for all the conversations we'd never had, all the support I'd never received, all the celebrations that had never happened. "Because," I said, my voice steadier now, "I needed to know I could do it without you, all of you. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't the failure you all thought I was." "We never said you were a failure," my mother protested. "You didn't have to say it." I gestured around the magnificent space. "Look at this place, Mom. Look at what I built. And then ask yourself why your first instinct is to be angry with me instead of proud." Carmen stepped forward diplomatically. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation while I show you the rest of the preparations? The catering team will need access to the kitchen soon." "Yes," I said gratefully. "Let me show you what I've accomplished here, all of it." As we moved through the manor, I found myself narrating not just the current state of the venue, but the journey it had taken to get there. I told them about finding the property listing online, about the months of negotiations with the previous owners, about the business plan I'd written and rewritten until my eyes burned. "The main reception hall was a disaster when I bought it," I explained as we entered the breathtaking space. Crystal chandeliers caught the afternoon light, casting prisms across walls painted in a soft champagne color that had taken me 6 attempts to get exactly right. The ceiling was water damaged, the floors were warped, and there was a family of raccoons living in the kitchen. Helena gasped. "Raccoons?" "I spent 3 days learning how to humanely relocate wildlife," I said, surprising myself with how good it felt to finally tell these stories. Then another 2 weeks figuring out how to repair the damage they'd caused. My father was studying the crown molding with the kind of attention he usually reserved for financial statements. This restoration work is professional grade. Who did you hire? Me, I said simply. I did most of it myself. Watched YouTube videos, read construction manuals, called in favors from contractors I'd worked with through my event planning business. You personally restored crown molding? My mother asked, incredulous. I personally restored everything you can see. The only things I hired out were the major electrical work and the roof repairs. Everything else, the painting, the flooring, the fixture installation, the landscaping, I did it all. We moved through room after room, and with each space, I shared another piece of the story they'd never bothered to ask about. The guest suite where I'd taught myself to hang wallpaper. The library where I'd spent an entire summer refinishing built-in bookshelves. The kitchen where I'd personally installed every cabinet because I couldn't afford a full renovation team. The business plan projected breaking even in year 3, I continued as we toured the catering prep area. But we hit profitability in 18 months. We're booked solid through next summer. We? My father asked sharply. My team. Carmen handles operations. Oliver manages technical aspects. Jade coordinates florals and design. I employ 12 people full-time now, plus seasonal staff for peak wedding season. The numbers seemed to hit my father like physical blows. 12 employees. Year-round bookings. Profitable operations. These weren't the metrics of a hobby business or someone still finding herself. What's the annual revenue? He asked, his voice strained. I told him. His face went pale. That's more than some of the practices at my firm generate, he said quietly. I know, I replied. I've been trying to tell you about my success for 2 years. But every time I mentioned the business, you changed the subject or made jokes about party planning. We had reached the bridal suite, Helena's preparation room for the evening. I designed it specifically for brides, with perfect lighting, comfortable seating, and a view of the gardens that never failed to make women cry happy tears. This is where you'll get ready, I told Helena, opening the French doors to reveal the space. She stepped inside and immediately burst into tears. Cassandra, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. But my parents were having a different reaction. I could see them processing, calculating, trying to reconcile this evidence of my competence with the narrative they'd constructed about my life. The marketing materials, my mother said suddenly. The website, the brochures we received, they never mentioned your name. The business operates under Rosewood Manor Events, LLC, I explained. I kept my personal name out of the marketing because I wanted the venue to succeed on its own merits, not because of family connections. Family connections? My father repeated. What family connections? We had no idea you were involved. Exactly, I said. I wanted to build something that was entirely mine. No questions about whether I'd gotten help, no speculation about whether I'd earned my success. Just a business that worked because I made it work. Carmen's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it discreetly. Cassandra, the electrical team needs an authorization for the temporary power grid. Should I handle it, or? I'll handle it, I said, then turned to my family. This is what I mean. Every decision, every crisis, every success, it all comes back to me. Because this is my business. I pulled out my phone and called the head electrician directly. My family watched as I authorized emergency repairs, approved overtime costs, and coordinated with the power company for priority service restoration. Yes, whatever it takes to have full power restored by 6 p.m., I said into the phone. Cost is not a factor. This is my venue, and this wedding will be perfect. When I hung up, my father was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. You just authorized $15,000 in emergency repairs without blinking, he said. Because I can afford it, I replied. Because this business generates enough revenue to handle unexpected costs. Because I'm not the financially irresponsible child you think I am. My mother sank into one of the elegant chairs in the bridal suite. I don't understand any of this. How did we not know? How did you hide something this big?" "I didn't hide it," I said, feeling the full weight of years of frustration. "I tried to share it with you. Remember last Christmas when I mentioned buying property? You said real estate was too risky for someone in my position. Remember Easter when I talked about hiring employees? You suggested I focus on getting a steady job first. Remember Damien's birthday when I offered to host the party here? You said you preferred venues with, quote, established reputations." Each memory hit them like an accusation because it was true. They had dismissed every hint, every attempt to share my success, every invitation to be part of my achievements. "We thought you were being optimistic," my mother said weakly. "We thought you were exaggerating." "You thought I was lying," I corrected. "You thought your disappointing daughter couldn't possibly have accomplished anything worth taking seriously." Helena reached out and squeezed my hand. "For what it's worth, I think this is incredible. You should be so proud of what you've built." "I am proud," I said, and realized it was true. Standing there in my bridal suite, surrounded by evidence of everything I'd accomplished, I felt proud for the first time in years. Not defiant, not defensive, proud. But as I looked at my parents' faces, I could see them struggling with a reality that didn't fit their expectations. Their disappointment of a daughter was actually their most successful child. Their frivolous business was more profitable than they'd imagined possible. Their assumptions about my capabilities had been completely wrong, and now they had to decide what to do with that information. The wedding was in 3 hours, and we still had a crisis to manage. But the bigger question hanging in the air wasn't about electrical repairs or backup generators. It was about whether my family could handle the truth, about who I really was. The tension in the bridal suite was thick enough to cut with a knife when my mother finally spoke, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was about to say something she believed was reasonable but that would inevitably make everything worse. "Well," Vivian said, smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled slightly, "I suppose we need to discuss how to handle this with the guests." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not, "Congratulations on your success." Not, "We're proud of what you've accomplished." Not even, "Why didn't you trust us enough to tell us?" Instead, her first concern was damage control. "Handle this?" I repeated slowly. "Cassandra, you have to understand our position," my father interjected, his analytical mind already working through the social implications. "We've been telling everyone about this exclusive venue we selected. If people find out that we didn't actually choose Rosewood Manor, that our daughter has been involved, it raises questions." "Questions about what, exactly?" "About whether we knew," my mother said, as if this should be obvious. "About whether this was some kind of family arrangement. About whether we were being honest about our venue selection process." I stared at them both, feeling something cold and hard crystallizing in my chest. Even now, even faced with undeniable evidence of my success, their primary concern wasn't my achievement. It was their reputation. Helena shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Does it really matter how we got here? The venue is beautiful. The wedding will be perfect." "Of course it matters," my mother snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "I'm sorry, dear. It's just that in our social circle, authenticity is very important. People need to know that we earned our access to exclusive venues." "Earned?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "What exactly do you think you earned here?" "We paid for it," my father said defensively. "Full price, I might add. We didn't ask for any family discounts or special treatment." "Because you didn't know you were dealing with family," I shot back. "You paid full price to a business you had no idea your daughter owned. You selected this venue based on its reputation and exclusivity, never knowing that both of those things were built by me." Carmen appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Excuse me, but the catering team needs to start setting up in the reception hall." "Should I?" "Give us 5 more minutes," I said, not taking my eyes off my parents. "Actually," my mother said, standing abruptly, "I think we need more time to discuss this properly. Perhaps we should postpone." "Postpone?" Helena's voice cracked with panic. "Postpone the wedding? The guests are already on their way. The photographer will be here in an hour. We can't just—" "Of course we can," my father said with the calm certainty of a man who believed money could solve any problem. "We'll call everyone, explain there was a venue emergency, reschedule for next weekend somewhere else." "Somewhere else?" I stood up so quickly my chair nearly toppled. "You want to cancel Damien's wedding because you're embarrassed that I own the venue?" "We're not embarrassed," my mother protested, but her face told a different story. "We just need time to figure out how to present this situation appropriately." "Present it appropriately?" My voice was rising and I didn't care. "How about presenting it as your daughter being successful beyond your wildest imagination? How about presenting it as the family being proud of an entrepreneur who built something beautiful from nothing?" "Cassandra, please try to understand," my father began. "No." The word came out with such force that everyone in the room fell silent. "No, I'm done trying to understand. I'm done making excuses for your behavior. I'm done pretending that your constant disappointment in me is somehow my fault." Damien, who had been silent through most of this exchange, finally spoke up. "Wait, are you seriously suggesting we cancel my wedding because Cass owns the venue? That's insane." "It's not insane," my mother said desperately. "It's complicated. People will ask questions. They'll want to know why we didn't mention the family connection. They'll wonder if we've been dishonest about other things." "So let them wonder," Damien said, his voice gaining strength. "Let them ask questions. The answer is simple. My sister is incredibly talented and successful, and we're lucky enough to be celebrating in a venue she created." "You don't understand the social dynamics," my father started. "I understand that you're more worried about what Evelyn Thornberry thinks than you are about your own daughter's feelings," Damien interrupted, his face flushing with anger I'd rarely seen from him. "I understand that even when Cass proves she's successful beyond anything either of us has accomplished, your first instinct is to figure out how to hide it." Helena was crying now, her carefully applied makeup starting to smudge. "I just want to get married," she whispered. "I don't care who owns the venue. I don't care what anyone thinks. I just want to marry Damien in this beautiful place that Cassandra created." Looking at Helena's tears, at Damien's frustrated anger, at my parents' stubborn refusal to simply be proud of me, I felt something shift inside me, a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. "You know what?" I said quietly. "You're right, this is complicated, so let me make it simple for you." I walked to the window overlooking the gardens where my staff was making final preparations for the ceremony. Guests would start arriving in 2 hours. The caterers were setting up in the kitchen I'd renovated myself. The florists were arranging centerpieces I'd helped design. "You have a choice to make," I continued, turning back to face them. "You can stay, celebrate Damien and Helena's wedding in a venue I'm proud to own, and figure out how to be proud of your daughter's success. Or you can leave." "Cassandra," my mother gasped. "I'm not finished." My voice was steady now, powered by years of accumulated frustration and newfound confidence. "If you stay, you get to tell everyone the truth. That your daughter owns Rosewood Manor. That she built a successful business while you were dismissing her efforts. That you're proud of her accomplishments, even if you're just figuring that out today." I paused, letting the weight of the ultimatum sink in. "If you can't do that, if you're more concerned about your social standing than your daughter's achievements, then you're welcome to leave. I'll refund every penny you paid, I'll handle the guest notifications myself, and Helena and Damien can have a smaller, more intimate ceremony with people who actually care about their happiness." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my heart pounding, could see the shock on my parents' faces, could feel Damien and Helena holding their breath. Carmen appeared in the doorway again, her timing impeccable as always. "Cassandra, the electrical repair team says they'll have full power restored in 30 minutes. Should I tell them to proceed?" "Yes," I said, not breaking eye contact with my parents. "Full power restoration, whatever it costs." "And the guest arrivals? Should I have the staff prepared for full capacity?" I looked at my mother, then my father, waiting for their answer. The choice was theirs now. Accept their daughter's success and celebrate it, or prioritize their pride over their family. Well, I asked quietly, what's it going to be? The weight of years of dismissal, years of being overlooked, years of quiet achievement that had gone unnoticed, hung in the air between us. This was the moment that would define our relationship moving forward. And for the first time in my life, I held all the power. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds. I watched my parents' faces cycle through emotions I'd never seen them express so openly: shock, calculation, fear, and something that might have been shame. My father was the first to break. His shoulders sagged, as if the weight of his own prejudices had finally become too heavy to carry. "We never meant," he started, then stopped, running his hand through his carefully styled hair. "Cassandra, we never meant to make you feel like we weren't proud of you." "But you weren't," I said simply. "You aren't. Even now, your first concern isn't my success. It's how to manage the social implications of my success." My mother's face crumpled, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw her without her social mask. The perfectly composed Vivian Hartwell was gone, replaced by a woman who suddenly looked older, smaller, more fragile. "That's not true," she whispered. "We love you." "Love and pride are different things, Mom. You can love someone while still being disappointed in them. You can love someone while still wishing they were different. And that's what you've done with me for years." Helena shifted in her chair, her wedding dress rustling softly. "Maybe we should give you all some privacy to work this out." "No," Damien said firmly, standing up and moving to my side. "This affects all of us. If they can't accept Cassandra's success, if they're willing to cancel my wedding because they're embarrassed by their own daughter, then Helena and I need to know that now." My father looked stunned. "Damien, you don't understand the complexity." "I understand perfectly," my brother interrupted, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "I understand that my sister built something incredible while working twice as hard as any of us ever have. I understand that she kept it secret because she knew you'd find a way to diminish it. And I understand that even when faced with proof of her success, your first instinct was to hide it." "We just wanted to protect," my mother began. "Protect what?" Damien demanded. "Your reputation? Your standing at the country club? What about protecting Cassandra? What about protecting her feelings, her confidence, her right to be celebrated for her achievements?" I felt tears prick my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. For the first time in my life, someone in my family was fighting for me instead of trying to manage me. "Damien, you don't have to," I started. "Yes, I do," he said, turning to face me. "I should have done this years ago. I should have spoken up every time they dismissed your business. Every time they changed the subject when you tried to share your successes. Every time they made you feel like you weren't enough." Helena stood up, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. "I agree with Damien. Cassandra, what you've accomplished is extraordinary. And if your parents can't see that, if they're more concerned with appearances than with celebrating their daughter, then maybe we should have our wedding somewhere else." "What?" My mother looked genuinely panicked now. "Helena, dear, you don't mean that." "I absolutely mean it," Helena said, her voice gaining strength. "I want to get married in a place created by love and hard work and genuine achievement. Cassandra's venue represents all of those things. If you can't appreciate that, if you can't be proud of her, then maybe you're not the kind of people we want celebrating with us." My father was staring at Helena as if she'd just announced she was joining the circus. "Helena, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking very clearly," she replied, "clearer than I have in months. Do you know what Cassandra did last week? She personally drove to Charleston to find the exact shade of ivory ribbon I wanted for my bouquet. Not because I asked her to, because she noticed I wasn't completely happy with the original choice. She spent her own money and her own time to make sure every detail of my wedding was perfect." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. I had done that, but I hadn't expected Helena to notice, much less remember. "And 2 weeks ago," Helena continued, When the florist said the peonies I wanted might not be available, Cassandra called growers in 3 different states to find them. She coordinated delivery, negotiated prices, and made sure I got exactly what I dreamed of. My mother was staring at Helena with growing confusion. But she's just the maid of honor. Those aren't maid of honor responsibilities. She wasn't acting as my maid of honor, Helena said firmly. She was acting as the owner of this venue, making sure her client, me, had the perfect wedding. She's been taking care of every detail for months, and you never even noticed. The revelation hit my parents like a physical blow. They'd thought I was just being a helpful sister, but I'd actually been managing their son's wedding as a professional service provider. For months, I'd been coordinating with vendors, solving problems, ensuring perfection, and they dismissed it all as family obligation. "Carmen," I called toward the doorway where I knew she was discreetly waiting. "Could you bring the Hartwell wedding file?" Carmen appeared with a thick folder that she handed to me. I opened it to reveal months of contracts, correspondence, vendor agreements, and detailed planning documents. "This," I said, holding up the folder, "is the professional service package for Damien and Helena's wedding. Venue rental, coordination services, vendor management, emergency planning, timeline development, the whole thing." I handed the folder to my father, whose eyes widened as he flipped through pages of detailed documentation. "The coordination fee alone," he said quietly, reading one of the contracts, "is more than we paid for your college tuition." "And I waived it," I said. "Along with the family discount on the venue rental. You paid exactly what any other client would pay, but you received significantly more service than any other client ever gets." My mother sank back into her chair, her face pale. All those phone calls about details, all those questions about preferences, that wasn't just wedding planning. That was professional event management. By someone who owns one of the most exclusive venues in the region, Helena added pointedly. My father was still reading through the contracts, his expression growing more stunned with each page. "Cassandra, the level of detail here, the vendor relationships, the contingency planning, this is sophisticated business management." "It's my job," I said simply. "It's what I do. It's what I've been trying to tell you I do for 2 years." Carmen stepped forward diplomatically. "If I may, the electrical repairs are complete. Full power has been restored to all systems. The kitchen is operational, the sound system is tested and ready, and the lighting throughout the venue is functioning perfectly." She paused, looking at each family member in turn. "We are fully prepared to host a beautiful wedding celebration for 300 guests, beginning with cocktails at 5:30 and ceremony at 6 o'clock. The only question is whether the family would like to proceed." The weight of the decisions settled over us again. All the technical problems were solved. The venue was perfect, the staff was ready, the vendors were prepared. The only obstacle to Damien and Helena's dream wedding was my parents' inability to celebrate their daughter's success. "It's your choice," I said to my parents, my voice steady despite the emotion churning in my chest. "You can stay and be proud of what I've built, or you can leave and explain to 300 guests why you chose your pride over your family." My mother looked around the bridal suite, the space I'd designed and built and furnished with my own hands and money and vision. For the first time, I saw her really seeing it, not as a venue they'd selected, but as something their daughter had created. "You did all this," she said softly, "and it wasn't a question. Every bit of it. And you're successful, really successful. More successful than you ever imagined I could be." She was quiet for a long moment, tears finally spilling over her carefully applied makeup. "Then I owe you an apology," she whispered. "The biggest apology of my life." My mother's apology hung in the air between us, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. 28 years of feeling invisible, of having my achievements dismissed, of being treated like the family disappointment, and now she was crying in my bridal suite, finally seeing me for who I really was. "Vivian," my father said quietly, his voice thick with emotion I'd never heard from him before, He was still holding the wedding contract file, still staring at the evidence of my professional competence. Look at this vendor network. Look at these cost projections and timeline management documents. Our daughter runs a more sophisticated operation than half the businesses I work with. I know, my mother whispered, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue Helena had quietly handed her. I know, and I've been blind to it. We've been blind to it. I felt my chest tighten with a complex mix of vindication and grief. This was what I'd wanted to hear for years, but it came at such a cost. It had taken a crisis, an ultimatum, and the threat of canceling my brother's wedding for them to finally see me. The question now, I said carefully, is what we do moving forward. The wedding starts in 90 minutes. Guests will be arriving soon. We need to decide as a family whether we can move past this. Helena stood up, smoothing her wedding dress with nervous hands. I need to know that everyone here actually wants to celebrate today. I can't get married surrounded by resentment and hurt feelings. There won't be any resentment, Damien said firmly, looking directly at our parents. Because Mom and Dad are going to do something they should have done years ago. They're going to publicly acknowledge and celebrate Cassandra's success. My father closed the contract folder and handed it back to me. How? He asked simply. How do we make this right? The question caught me off guard. For so long, I'd fantasized about this moment, about them finally recognizing my achievements. But I'd never thought past the acknowledgement to what actual change would look like. I don't know if you can make it right, I said honestly. 2 years of hiding this from you. 2 years of feeling like I had to prove myself in secret. That damage doesn't just disappear because you finally see the truth. But we want to try, my mother said, standing up and taking a tentative step toward me. Cassandra, we want to try to be the parents you deserved all along. Carmen appeared in the doorway again, her timing as impeccable as always. Excuse me, but the first guests have just arrived. Should I have them directed to the cocktail area? I looked around the room at my family. Helena beautiful and nervous in her wedding dress. Damien protective and angry on my behalf. My parents, finally stripped of their social masks, looking older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. Yes, I said to Carmen, full wedding celebration, everything proceeds as planned. Carmen smiled, the first genuine, relaxed smile I'd seen from her all day. Excellent. The staff is ready, the venue is perfect, and I believe your guests are going to be very impressed. After Carmen left, my mother reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were trembling slightly. Can you forgive us? She asked. Not right now, not all at once, but eventually? I studied her face, seeing past the makeup that had run slightly with her tears, past the carefully styled hair, to the genuine regret in her eyes. I can try, I said, but things have to change, really change. No more dismissing my business as a hobby, no more suggesting I need a real job, no more treating my success like it's less important than Damien's career. Agreed, my father said immediately, completely agreed. And you have to tell people the truth tonight, I continued. When guests compliment the venue, when they ask about how you found this place, you tell them your daughter owns it. You tell them you're proud of what I've built. We will, my mother promised. We absolutely will. Helena stepped forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Can we have a group hug? Because I really need a group hug right now, and then I need to touch up my makeup before the ceremony. We came together in the middle of the bridal suite, all of us, even my father, who wasn't typically demonstrative with physical affection. For a moment, we were just a family holding each other, trying to bridge years of misunderstanding with simple human contact. I'm proud of you, Cass, Damien murmured into my ear. I should have said it before, but I'm proud of everything you've accomplished. Thank you, I whispered back, feeling some of the tension in my chest finally begin to ease. When we broke apart, Helena was crying again, but she was smiling too. Okay, now I really need to fix my makeup. Cassandra, would you help me? Of course. As I touched up Helena's mascara and reapplied her lipstick, my parents stepped out onto the bridal suite's private balcony to give us space. Through the French doors, I could see them talking quietly, my father's arm around my mother's shoulders. Are you okay? Helena asked softly, studying my reflection in the vanity mirror. I think so, I said, surprised to realize it was true. It's going to take time to rebuild trust, but maybe this is a start. Your family loves you, she said. They just forgot how to show it properly. Maybe. I capped the lipstick and stepped back to admire my work. You look beautiful, by the way. Ready to marry my brother? So ready, she said, beaming. And thank you. Not just for fixing my makeup, but for everything. For creating this perfect venue, for handling all the crisis management today, for standing up for yourself. You're incredible, Cassandra. Through the window, I could see guests beginning to gather in the cocktail area I'd designed. Men in dark suits, women in elegant dresses, everyone looking appropriately impressed by the setting. Some were taking photos of the gardens. Others were admiring the architecture of the main building. My building, my gardens, my success. Carmen knocked gently on the doorframe. Helena, the photographer is ready for some final bridal portraits. And Cassandra, your parents are asking if they could speak with you privately for a moment. I nodded, feeling nervous again despite the progress we'd just made. Helena, I'll see you at the ceremony. You're going to be a beautiful bride. I found my parents in the hallway outside the bridal suite, standing close together in a way that reminded me they'd been married for 34 years and had weathered other storms together. Cassandra, my father said as I approached, there's something we need to ask you. What? Tonight, when we're talking to guests, when we're explaining about the venue, we want to do it right. We want to represent your accomplishments accurately. Can you help us understand how to talk about your business in a way that honors what you've built? The request was so unexpected, so thoughtful, that I felt tears spring to my eyes again. You want me to coach you on how to brag about me? I asked, half laughing. Yes, my mother said seriously. We want to learn how to be proud of you properly. We've clearly been doing it wrong for years. I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw something I'd never seen before. Humility, genuine desire to change, a willingness to put aside their own comfort to make things right with me. Okay, I said. Let's go make sure my brother has the perfect wedding in the venue his sister built. For the first time in years, that felt like the beginning of something new instead of the end of something broken. The ceremony was perfect, not just technically perfect. Though the sound system worked flawlessly, the lighting cast everything in a golden glow, and the flowers I'd personally sourced looked like something from a fairy tale, but emotionally perfect in ways I'd never expected. I stood at the altar in my emerald bridesmaid dress, watching Helena float down the aisle my landscapers had lined with white rose petals, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I truly belonged in my own family. During the processional, I caught sight of my parents in the front row. My mother was crying happy tears, her earlier makeup crisis expertly repaired. My father stood tall and proud, but when his eyes met mine, he smiled and mouthed, "Thank you. Not for being a good bridesmaid, not for helping with logistics, for creating this moment, this space, this beauty that would become part of Damien and Helena's love story forever." Judge Morrison, who was officiating, spoke about love that grows stronger through challenges, about partnerships built on mutual respect and recognition. As he talked about seeing and appreciating your partner's true worth, I felt the words settling into my chest like seeds that might finally be able to grow in soil that wasn't poisoned by disappointment. When Damien and Helena exchanged vows, promising to support each other's dreams and celebrate each other's successes, I saw my parents glance at each other with expressions that looked like quiet apologies. The parallels weren't lost on anyone. The recessional music played a string quartet I'd personally auditioned and hired, and as the newly married couple walked back down the aisle, Helena caught my eye and winked. She looked radiant, completely happy, like a woman who'd gotten exactly the wedding she'd dreamed of. The cocktail hour that followed was when everything truly changed. I was checking with the catering staff about the dinner timeline when I overheard my father talking to Judge Blackstone from the state Supreme Court. I'd been dreading this moment all day, wondering how my parents would handle questions about the venue. whether they'd find ways to deflect or minimize my role. "Richard, this place is absolutely stunning," Judge Blackstone was saying. "How on earth did you find it?" I held my breath, waiting for my father's response. "Actually, Judge, we didn't find it," my father said, his voice carrying a note of pride I'd never heard when talking about me. "Our daughter owns it. Cassandra built this entire business from the ground up over the past 2 years." "Your daughter?" Judge Blackstone looked genuinely impressed. "The one who was just in the wedding party?" "That's right. She bought the property when it was falling apart, personally oversaw every aspect of the renovation, and now runs one of the most successful event venues in the region. We're incredibly proud of what she's accomplished." I felt tears prick my eyes. He wasn't just telling the truth, he was bragging about me. Richard Hartwell, who'd spent years suggesting I needed a real job, was publicly celebrating my business success to one of the most respected professionals in the state. The conversation continued, and I watched my father's chest puff out with genuine parental pride as he described my hands-on restoration work, my employee management, my booking success. Every detail he dismissed when I'd tried to share it with him privately was now being presented as evidence of my exceptional capabilities. A few feet away, my mother was having a similar conversation with Mrs. Evelyn Thornberry, the garden club president who'd been her social rival for years. "Vivian, you simply must tell me about this venue," Mrs. Thornberry was gushing. "It's absolutely exquisite. The attention to detail is remarkable." "Thank you," my mother replied warmly, "though I can't take any credit. This is all Cassandra's vision and hard work. She's built something truly extraordinary here." "Cassandra? Your daughter?" "My incredibly talented daughter," my mother corrected, emphasizing each word. "She's an entrepreneur and artist who saw the potential in this property when no one else could. Every beautiful detail you see, the gardens, the restoration work, the flawless coordination, that's all her." I had to step away from the conversation before I started crying in front of the catering staff. Carmen found me a few minutes later, checking my reflection in the powder room mirror. "Everything all right?" she asked, though her smile suggested she'd already been listening to the same conversations I had. "Better than all right?" I said, touching up my lipstick with hands that were steadier than they'd been all day. "Carmen, I think this might actually work out." "The wedding?" "My family." She squeezed my shoulder affectionately. "For what it's worth, I think you handled today perfectly. Standing up for yourself, setting boundaries, demanding respect. That took courage." "It took desperation," I corrected with a laugh. "But maybe that's the same thing sometimes." The dinner portion of the evening was flawless. The kitchen I'd renovated produced course after course of perfectly prepared food. The dining room I'd designed created an atmosphere of elegant intimacy. The staff I'd trained moved through the service with professional grace. But the moment that meant the most came during the toasts. Damien stood up with his champagne glass, handsome in his tuxedo, beaming with happiness. "Helena and I want to thank everyone for celebrating with us tonight in this incredible venue. But there's someone special we need to recognize." He turned toward me and I felt my heart skip. My sister Cassandra didn't just help plan this wedding, she created the space where it's happening. 2 years ago, she saw potential in a rundown property that no one else wanted. She invested her savings, her time, her vision, and her incredible work ethic to build Rosewood Manor into what you see today. The room erupted in applause, and I felt my cheeks flush with pride and embarrassment. Cass taught herself construction techniques, negotiated with contractors, managed renovation crews, and personally restored most of what you see around you. She's not just my sister. She's one of the most capable, determined, successful people I know. And tonight, Helena and I get to celebrate our marriage in a venue created by someone we love. He raised his glass toward me. To Cassandra, who proves that when you combine vision with hard work, you can build anything, including dreams. The applause was thunderous. Guests were turning to look at me with new appreciation, seeing me not as the helpful sister, but as the accomplished businesswoman who'd created their beautiful evening. But what meant the most was watching my parents' faces. They were applauding harder than anyone, their expressions bright with pride that looked genuine for the first time in years. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to leave, my father approached me on the terrace where I was overseeing the cleanup coordination. "Cassandra," he said quietly, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you years of recognition and support that I failed to give you." "Dad, let me finish. What you've built here, what you've accomplished, it's remarkable. Not just the business success, though that's impressive enough. The vision, the execution, the leadership you've shown with your staff. You're operating at a level one didn't think you'd reached yet." He paused, looking out over the gardens that were twinkling with string lights I'd personally hung. "I think I was so focused on traditional measures of success that I couldn't see the extraordinary things you were doing right in front of me. That's my failure, not yours." "It's going to take time," I said honestly, "to rebuild trust, to change the dynamic between us." "I know. But if you'll let us try, your mother and I want to learn how to be the parents you deserve. Starting with asking how we can support your business instead of dismissing it." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I'd been waiting to see my entire life. Respect. Not just love, not just tolerance, but genuine respect for who I was and what I'd accomplished. "I'd like that," I said. As the last guests departed and my staff finished the cleanup, I stood alone in the main hall of Rosewood Manor, my success, my proof that I was exactly as capable as I'd always believed myself to be. The wedding had been perfect, but more than that, something fundamental had shifted in my family. The secret that had protected me for 2 years had finally become the truth that liberated me. I wasn't the family disappointment anymore. I wasn't the daughter who needed to prove herself. I was Cassandra Hartwell, successful entrepreneur, loving sister, and for the first time in my life, a daughter her parents were proud to claim. And as I turned off the lights in the venue I'd built with my own hands, my own vision, and my own determination, I realized that the greatest revenge really had been living well, and finally having the people who mattered most recognize just how well I'd lived. The silence that had once felt so loud in that taxi ride to discovery had transformed into something else entirely. The quiet confidence of a woman who knew exactly who she was and no longer needed anyone else's permission to be proud of it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.